It's now my honor to introduce former BC Cabinet Minister, longtime Prince George MLA Shirley Bond, to introduce our next panel on behalf of the Prince George Hospice Care Society.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today with the Executive Director of Prince George Hospice. She's amazing, Donna Flood, and Hospice is very proud to sponsor this panel. We absolutely recognize that natural resources are critical to our economy, but our most important asset is people. And one thing that I can tell you from personal experience is that hospice provides compassionate care during some of the worst and most challenging times in people's lives. So we want you to know that hospice, whether here in Prince George or across northern BC or the province, is here to support you, your organizations, the families, and the people who work so hard in this sector. We only ask that you stop by the hospice booth, learn a little bit more about the important services and care that hospice provides. With that, I'm very delighted to introduce the moderator for the panel, Tim McEwan. Tim is a Senior Vice President at the Mining Association of British Columbia. Tim has extensive experience in economic development, including right here in Prince George, numerous roles provincially. I've had the pleasure of working with him in many capacities. I know he'll do an excellent job. Please enjoy the panel, and thank you on behalf of Prince George Hospice.
Well, thank you very much, Shirley. Very nice to see you here today. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back in Prince George and on the traditional territories of the Lheidli First Nation. I'm very pleased to be moderating the panel today on Permitting to Prosperity, which is really about unlocking BC's critical mineral, steelmaking, coal, and refining opportunities. This morning, we have a great panel to address the current state of play in BC's mining and refining industry. More precisely, we want to address how we can realize the generational opportunity to build BC's 17 critical mineral, 5 precious metal, and 2 steelmaking coal projects that are currently in or about to enter regulatory process. We have a diverse panel of industry leaders today to probe the issues facing BC's mining and refining industry as they see them. Joining us today are Doug Brown, who's Vice President Communications and Government Affairs with Teck, Nadia Haider, Vice President, Regulatory, Strategy, Innovation and Environment with Conuma Resources, Gabe Jutras, who's Director of Operations and External Relations with Galore Creek Mining Corporation, Elizabeth Fillatre Miller, who's Vice President, Environment and Social Development with Seabridge Gold, and Martin Turenne, President and CEO, FPX Nickel. Full bios for all panelists are available on Whova. Each panelist will make opening remarks. We'll then transition to Q&A and finally close with a quick summation from each panel member. Audience, if you do have a question, please use the Whova app, and we'll do our best to get to it, recognizing that we do have a big panel here this morning. So in today's panel, we want to focus on the staggering opportunity in BC's mining industry in these tumultuous times. BC's metals, minerals, and steelmaking coal have amongst the lowest carbon footprints globally and are helping the world to transition to a cleaner, lower carbon future. Timely development of BC's critical minerals and steelmaking coal is imperative to provide secure supplies amidst mounting national, North American, and allied security requirements. Our industry meets some of the world's toughest regulatory standards. We lead in advancing economic reconciliation with Indigenous partners. In short, we do it right here in BC. We are very pleased as well that there is now a dedicated Ministry of Mining and Critical Minerals to accelerate new opportunities, and we are very encouraged about the bipartisan support in the recent election to speed up permitting. The 17 critical mineral opportunities could deliver as much as $36 billion in construction spending and up to $800 billion in total potential economic impact over an average mine life of 24.1 years. Building on existing strengths, BC also has exciting opportunities ahead in refining and recycling, and low-carbon steelmaking coal is needed for basic infrastructure and facilitating the energy transition. Think in terms of things such as wind farms, for example. We're very encouraged as well that by recent indications that the provincial government is beginning to act and make progress. Here I make reference to a couple of examples. Caribou Gold is now approved, and Premier Eby last night spoke about the delegation of permitting processes to the BC Energy Regulator for projects such as the North Coast Transmission Line. Committing to and delivering tangible results is essential to attract new investment, to grow our industry. The time to act is now, and British Columbians agree. According to a 2023 survey, 3/4 of British Columbians want BC to be a world leader in supplying critical minerals. This support is in every region of BC, across all generations, and across the political spectrum. So let's get to it, beginning with opening remarks. Each panel will take 3 minutes, and we'll start with Doug Brown. Over to you, Doug.
Thanks, Tim. Maybe just a bit about myself. I am a proud Northern British Columbian. I work out of Vancouver now for Teck, but I did grow up right here in Prince George. So really excited to be back in my hometown talking about responsible resource development and about the incredible opportunity that exists with critical minerals and how we seize that opportunity on behalf of all British Columbians. I work for Teck, like I mentioned. We are a proudly Canadian company founded about 110 plus years ago in Eastern Canada, and today our global headquarters is in Vancouver. We operate with active mine sites and projects across North and South America. And here in British Columbia, we are one of the largest producers of critical minerals and employ about 4,000 people across our projects, operations, and offices. Those include the Highland Valley Copper Mine near Kamloops. That's Canada's largest copper mine. It's a significant source of copper for Canada, a huge economic driver, and we're looking at making some significant investments as well to extend the life of that important mine site. We also operate the Trail Operations Refinery in Trail, BC. That's one of the world's largest zinc and lead refining complexes, and as well as refined zinc and lead. It's also an important source of minerals like germanium, indium, as well as fertilizers and other chemicals. So a big focus on growth at Teck. We recently undertook a major transformation of our company, refocusing our business entirely around metals that are essential for the energy transition and for economic development, with a big focus on growing our copper business, and that includes our projects here in British Columbia. We're also sort of redefining Teck's approach to how we engage with Indigenous peoples as well. We really focused on early engagement and close engagement with Indigenous communities to ensure that they are, we understand their priorities, we hear their input, and we take that on board as we advance our projects. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we see the critical mineral opportunity for British Columbia is enormous, but we have to recognize that how we advance those projects needs to find the right balance between environmental and social performance, while also ensuring that we're competitive globally and that we're providing those materials in a way that is responsible and economically competitive. So really looking forward to the discussion today, talking about mineral development, about how we improve the permitting regime here in British Columbia, and how we can get more mines built faster in BC.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Maybe Gabe will move along to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Over the past 6 years, two of the largest mining companies operating in Canada, Teck Resources and Newmont Corporation, have been working together to advance the Galore Creek project. In terms of potential to bring online new critical mineral production, Galore Creek represents one of the most important opportunities in BC and in Canada. Galore Creek is a large copper-gold deposit located in Tahltan Territory in northwest BC, and it has the potential to become the largest copper producer in the country. The project is operated by Galore Creek Mining Corporation, a 50-50 partnership between Teck Resources and Newmont. Galore Creek has a long history of working closely with the Tahltan Nation. We've been continuing to implement an IBA that was signed in 2006. And we're proud of the work that we've done to include and provide opportunity for Tahltan people on the project, and look forward to continuing to work closely with Tahltan in the years ahead. Through Galore Creek, Teck and Newmont continue to make annual investments in the BC economy. Our current program is focused on delivering an updated pre-feasibility study that will reduce risk and provide robust economics. For the focus of the panel, we have just recently completed an important regulatory process that updates and modernizes our existing environmental assessment certificate for our access road, and that's going to support us in being able to have confidence in our ability to develop our access road and do it in compliance. And as we work to complete our pre-feasibility study, we're positioning to initiate a major regulatory process that will update our existing authorizations to develop that updated project configuration. As we look forward towards a full sanction decision, we're focused on those key areas that we know we need to reduce risk and provide confidence in order to support the full sanction decision of moving forward with the operation and the construction of it. And I think the panel today is going to touch on three key ones, one being regulatory, one being Indigenous relations, and another on regional infrastructure. So looking forward to the conversation here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Nadia, over to you.
All right. Is this working? Yes. All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to make this pretty exciting, the topic of permits. Except to prosperity. That's the exciting part. Everyone, good morning. It's nice to be here. As Tim mentioned, I'm Nadia, and I'm with Conuma Resources Limited. We're a private mining company that mines metallurgical coal that's used for steel making, and we're based out of Tumbler Ridge, BC. We have 3 mines, Willow Creek Mine, Brule Mine, and Wolverine Mine, and of recent success, the year before, we acquired Teck's old Quintet Mine, and then as of last year, we received a permit to begin mining and operating in one of the pits at Quintet Mine. This was a huge successful moment and a win for everyone, not just Conuma, but the local communities and the First Nations and the businesses that thrive off of the development of Quintet. It began operating after being in care and maintenance for 24 years. So that was a very huge win, and a big party was thrown in town. Aside from that, we are looking at a lot of good momentum was had last year. We completed building Conuma's first large-scale water treatment plant. We invested about $70 million, and so for this year, we're really looking to get better at treating water, getting that plant up and running so that we can actually have the authorizations in place to do that. And we continue to look to grow and expand. Last year, we also found significant improvements in how we work together with our First Nations as well as the local communities, and we want to continue on that momentum for this year as we continue to grow, as well as with Wolverine Mine being into care and maintenance. We're looking to do more reclamation in that space and being really creative around that as well. A lot of those activities do require permitting, and so really looking to work collaboratively with the First Nations, which we've really significantly improved on, but also with the regulatory bodies on how we can move these very exciting projects along. Oh, and I guess one thing I wanted to mention a little bit about myself. I've been with Conuma for 3 years now, and in the last 3 years, a lot has happened. I came to Conuma from the Alberta Energy Regulator, where I was there for 10 years as a statutory decision maker. I'm a geologist by trade and have been in the mining industry for most of my career. And I'm told I'm younger than I look, so I've put in some time. But also, it's been very, very interesting, as it would be to, and Tim can probably relate a little bit to this, but definitely working in the regulatory system and then now working in the private sector. And I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nadia. Elizabeth.
Well, good morning, everyone. As Tim mentioned, my name is Elizabeth Miller, and I'm the VP of Environment and Social Responsibility with Seabridge Gold. A little bit about myself, I'm a proud UNBC alumni. I think I graduated I was one of the second classes at UNBC here in Prince George, although I don't necessarily want to date myself. I also live in Smithers, and I work for Seabridge Gold out of our Smithers office. We do have a booth here today, so in case you're interested in learning a little bit more about Seabridge Gold and our projects in Northwest BC, please feel free to come and visit us. So a little bit about our talk today. We're on the cusp of a generational opportunity in BC. BC is fortunate to have an abundance of 16 of Canada's 31 critical minerals. These aren't just economic assets, they're opportunities for thousands of jobs, thousands of contract opportunities, supplier opportunities, as well as jobs that can be from the northern parts of this province to the southern parts of this province. But we must look at ways of streamlining these processes so that we can benefit from these resources. There's a lot of benefits from critical minerals, yet we must also look at the fact that this industry has been facing significant permitting challenges. Those unknowns cause significant risk for this industry. We must find ways to streamline without compromising on the environmental integrity, Indigenous engagement, as well as community engagement. My fellow panelists and I have been invited up here today to talk about some of our experiences with our respective projects. Will those projects and the lessons learned that we have necessarily be beneficial to all of you? Not necessarily so, because each project is unique. Each nation has unique and specific needs that they have. However, what I do think is important is the fact that we're up here having this dialogue today, talking about ways to streamline the industry, talking about ways to work together collaboratively with government, industry, Indigenous groups, so that we can ensure that BC is a leader in the critical mining space. Thank you very much, Tim, and I look forward to the conversation with our fellow panelists today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Martin.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Turenne. I'm the president and CEO of FPX Nickel. We're a company with two offices, an office in Fort St. James, as well as an office in Vancouver. We're focused on the development of a project called the Baptiste Nickel Project, which is the project and associated infrastructure located on the traditional territories of multiple nations, including Classa Nation, Binche Nation, Yukutche First Nation, and Takla Nation. The project is well understood from a geological standpoint, still relatively early stages from an engineering and design standpoint. We completed a preliminary feasibility study in 2023, and over the next several months, we're looking to work together with impacted First Nations and the province to define what the environmental assessment process for the project would look like, which we would hope to enter this year. So we are, by some measure, the smallest company on the stage here, very much a junior company. You know, I always come back to the fact that the mining industry, in particular the critical minerals opportunity, is unique in our country, in our province, in its ability to achieve, four objectives. So the first is, real economic development. We published an economic impact study for our project earlier this week that suggests the project could generate over $45 billion of GDP growth for the province over the course of its 30-year life. Secondly is true, meaningful reconciliation with First Nations in every dimension that can support First Nations full involvement in oversight through environmental assessment and permitting, full economic participation, including equity ownership, which is a concept that we're very interested in discussing with nations and with government as we move forward. The third piece is, of course, facilitating the transition to a low-carbon economy. And the fourth is strengthening allied ties with geopolitical allies around the world. There's not a single, with due respect to forestry, to oil and gas, to other industries, the tech industry, manufacturing, there's not a single industry in our country that can help us as Canadians to achieve important objectives in all four of those areas. So it's an exciting time, and I think, for our country.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So we'll now move to questions. And with that, I see, Huva, there's a few references to permitting, and I'm going to try and bundle that up into one question on this that's hopefully comprehensive enough to cover it. And I'd like to proceed as follows. The government and the official opposition have taken note of MABC and others' efforts to put permitting and authorizations at the forefront of government's agenda. Can you provide your thoughts on what you think government needs to do to fix BC's perennially sclerotic permitting and authorization process? I know this is a big topic, but your sharp insights from experience will be instructive for the audience. What will it take to finally crack this nut? And I'll begin with Elizabeth.
Tim, you're going to have to time me on this one. Yeah. Make sure you cut me off when I've reached my time so everybody has an opportunity to speak. The permitting challenges are something that Seabridge Gold lives and breathes every day. It causes such a large amount of risk for any project in BC and, of course, in Canada. So it's something that we strategically think about frequently, day to day within our team. So I had an opportunity to jot down some notes, and I'm going to share some of those learnings with you. I did want to say that we have had an enormous amount of success. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about, I just want to put into context, are that Seabridge Gold now holds 78 permits for our KSM project. KSM is in the early stages of construction. We are an advanced exploration company. We've started doing some early stage construction activities. So as of today, 78 permits. We've had some recent successes that I also want to comment on, such as the substantial start determination, which locks in the environmental assessment for the life of the mine, as well as a license of occupation for our Mitchell Treaty Tunnel. So I just wanted to give a shout out and acknowledgement to the government of BC for working with us through that process. We really appreciate all your efforts. I did also want to acknowledge the fact that we work cooperatively with and had the support of the Nisga'a Nation, who I know are here, as well as the Tahltan Nation while we went through this process. In addition, we've had the support of local communities such as Stewart, Smithers, Terrace, the Regional District of Kitimat, Stikine, Hazelton, and the District of New Hazelton. So a lot of support, so I just wanted to give those shout outs. So some of the lessons that I would say we would like to bring forward are timelines and having defined timelines for permits. The Mines Act permit process, the environmental assessment process have timelines that are guidelines throughout those processes, which are great. However, you require a large number of permits for any project to develop in BC. License of occupation as an example, SUPs, Environmental Management Act permits, etc. All of those have no defined timelines. So that's something that we would like to see. Resources. All of the frontline staff with government as well as with the Indigenous groups are doing a fantastic job. They're working really hard, they're putting in a lot of time, and oftentimes they're under-resourced. So we need to think about putting more resources to those frontline staff. Coordination and communication. I would have to say and give a shout out to the Major Projects Office. We've seen a lot of improvement here, but we need to see more in terms of coordination and communication between government agencies within the BC government, between the Government of Canada and BC, as well as from government to Indigenous groups. We'd like to see improved communication and coordination there. Also, updated information sharing tools. The amount of requirements for the permitting processes, the sheer amount of data and material that's required now of industry partners, and we have very few up-to-date technology sharing tools that we can interactively share our comments and engage on projects with. Reduced redundancy between the environmental assessment as well as those detailed permitting processes. There's overlap there, and we would like to see some of those processes streamlined. And also, government, we would love you to look at more area-based and results-based system instead of the prescriptive permitting that we're in right now. You could get a permit, as an example, get permitted through the environmental assessment and then finally get another permit for an access road. But if you want to make minor changes to that, you're essentially kicked out of the system and back in almost for an entire new permit review. And it's taking away valuable resources where they need to be. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Well done. Anybody else like to pick up on the theme?
I might chime in a couple things. I really thought the point about coordination and communication is a really important one. And I think that sometimes what's at root with the challenges that we see there is just organizations, whether that's industry or an Indigenous group or a government ministry, we have to figure out how to understand each other. So I think that sometimes there's like a translational challenge in really understanding what another organization is trying to achieve. And I think that just an emphasis on working to understand each other and understand how an organization functions and trying to have trying to work to build trust-based relationships and have candid conversations, I think is really important in moving that forward.
Please go ahead.
All right. Tim, rein me in, okay? Sort of building on what Elizabeth said, risk-based and outcomes-focused. I think we need to see more of that. And what I mean by that is, currently it appears as if there's no triage process, in the sense that it appears for any given activity, there's a lot of review and effort and resources from regulators that are drawn into reviewing such activity. And as a result, in the intensity of its review, that leads to delays potentially in the issuance of those permits, but also something we've noticed is, what is the outcome that we are trying to achieve? And back to a little bit on what you touched on, Elizabeth, it's the how. And it's the industry that has the resources and the time to be able to invest in the how and make the how happen. In my opinion, it's what is the outcomes we're trying to achieve with the permitting process. And that often gets lost in the how, in the sense that we're finding that we're getting caught up too much in prescriptive regulation instead of, is the outcome being achieved? Okay, then let's do that. And that comes with a little bit of a risk tolerance, in my opinion. And for example, a notice, for example, a permit to do exploration work for mining, coal mine, where the average hole is about 100 meters, we're seeing a turnaround timeline of 1 year, which is likened also to a mine amendment and an expansion on an existing mine. So with no risk sort of based framework, and it appears as sort of a lost on what the outcomes is, it's a draw on resources on the regulatory side, which we constantly hear is an issue, and as a result, a delay in timelines. And a delay in timelines is important because it doesn't provide for certainty in investments, as well as making Conuma, for instance, a reliable supplier to the international market. So I'll stop there.
Can I bridge just off of one thing really quickly? I'll be brief. You just speaking to what the process is intended to achieve, I think is important, and I think I know that government is focused on making improvements to the process, but I think as we're looking at a regulatory regime and what changes to be made, I think it's really important that we take time to think about what's good about the current regime and what we don't want to lose as those changes are made. And in particular, I think we need to think about the quality of our authorizations and realize that they're not binary. It isn't just you have one or you don't. There's, I think, some important measures to think of in terms of what the quality of an authorization is. I would say resilience to legal challenge is a really important thing to be thinking about, and we want to maintain that. I think it's quite good in BC, and it's important to not lose that. And I think clarity on measures of regulatory compliance is critical, and I think there's been good improvements on that in recent years. I actually think certified project descriptions are pretty effective. That way, we just went through a regulatory process with an intention of creating a certified project description for the portion of our certificate that is our access road. And we did that because we know that once you're actually in construction, that clarity on measure of regulatory compliance is really critical to being able to effectively operate.
I'm just going to underline what Elizabeth mentioned on permitting and certainty of timelines. I think that is one of the most essential parts of a competitive regulatory regime, is having clarity and certainty that when you have a timeline that it will be achievable or reasonable. You can expect it will actually happen. When you look at the kinds of, the scale of investment that companies and investors are looking at making in mining projects, you need to have certainty that your timeline that you've been given with this project review is actually going to turn out somewhere in the ballpark of that. Because if we don't have that, any kind of certainty around timing, investment dollars will go elsewhere where there is more clarity, where they know that they can pull the trigger on these projects and actually get shovels in the ground when conditions are right. I mean, there's a lot of factors when it comes to, especially major mine development, that are out of our control. Things like commodity prices, market forces, those are outside our ability to influence. In theory, the permitting process that we put in place in our province, in our nation, that should be within our control. So that's a lever we should be able to affect when we think about improving how we get new mines on stream faster and meet global demand. That should be a lever that we can actually pull on. And I note that the BCNDP has committed to timelines for priority critical mineral projects. So I think we're all going to be watching that really closely to see how that's enforced and achieved, and if that translates into actual faster permitting.
Thanks, Doug. Well said. Martin, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think we come at this as a company very much in the pre-regulatory phase, but looking to increase our readiness to actually enter that ideally later this year. And I would applaud the provincial government and the Ministry of Mining and Critical Minerals for launching the Critical Minerals Office last year, which is designed to be a concierge service that identifies projects in this pre-regulatory phase. And you know, as we have experienced it, we've seen real evidence that is one, working to increase our readiness as a company to enter the process, and also to increase the readiness of the province and the various ministries and many agencies that are involved in the EA and ultimately permitting. I might have more to say later about a kind of a similar approach that could be taken from a First Nations standpoint as well.
Thanks, Martin. I think we'll move along to another topic, and that's partnerships with First Nations, which are foundational to realizing the enormous opportunity that's in front of us as an industry. And just wondering if you could each provide your thoughts on what's needed to forge enduring partnerships with First Nations as we pursue these generational mine development opportunities. And you know, what practical ways can First Nations and industry work together to advance the opportunities ahead of us? And maybe I'll begin with you, Gabe.
Thanks, Tim. I think the first thing I want to speak to is my belief that when we as a mining industry get our relationships with Indigenous peoples right, that the industry has tremendous potential for advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada and in BC. And I would actually argue that mining's been on the forefront of that for a long time. When we think about mining in BC and reconciliation, I think people are inclined to think first about economic benefits, employment opportunities, training. But I think maybe one of the most important pieces there is just how Indigenous people are treated on our sites. And I know that at our site, I want to see that Indigenous people are respected, that they're included, that they're provided leadership opportunities, that they're valued for their contributions. And I think the culture that we create at our sites is really, really critical in having these things go well. Moving to ways that Indigenous groups and industry can work together, I think I'll just flag a couple examples. One is, I think that the consent-based role that we're seeing for Tahltan for 2 mining projects right now is really important. And I think it's, I know that there's 2 mining projects that are working through an environmental assessment process with Tahltan in a consent-based role. And we're really pleased that the province has announced that when we are ready to commence our major regulatory process and a complex amendment, that Tahltan will be positioned in a consent-based role for that as well. And then I want to speak to the regulatory process that we just completed. It was, as I said before, focused on improving our measure of regulatory compliance for the development of our access road. And that process has been precedent-setting in a couple of important ways. One is this is the first time that an EAC, an old-style EAC, has been successfully modernized. Now, it was just for a scope focused on the access road, but it's a modernization of an old-style certificate, and I think that that is going to end up being important for a lot of proponents going forward that have old-style certificates. But the second way is that this is, we understand, the first time that EAO and an Indigenous group have co-drafted an amendment, and just want to express our gratitude to EAO and to Tahltan for that collaborative effort and seeing that through to successful completion.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Nadia?
Doug, you go ahead.
Maybe I'll just I'll add some perspective in sense of it's been mentioned already the importance of early engagement, of consistent engagement, of building strong relationships as kind of foundational. I think though it's also important, like we need to be focused on engagement that is meaningful, and we're hearing the priorities and concerns of Indigenous communities and stakeholders, and then that feedback, that input, those issues and that knowledge is integrated into the projects that we eventually take forward. I'll give an example from Teck. At our Highland Valley Copper Mine, we're advancing a proposed mine life extension there, really important for the long-term future of that major operation, a major copper mine. And the NFLCATMA Assembly authored NFLCATMA knowledge directly into the chapters of our EA application. And I think we believe this is the first time in the province's history that this was done, that an Indigenous organization directly authored a component of an EA application. And that was important to demonstrate that we not just listened, but really heard and really took that on board as part of how we were advancing the project and baking it into the DNA of that project from the ground up.
I'll just add on to exactly sort of what Doug just finished. For us, our learning was making time and actively listening. So what that translated to tangibly is last year specifically, we sort of changed our approach and we got together in person. That in-person connection is invaluable. And we reviewed those sort of several hundred plus pages of management plans, several water management plans, caribou management plans, and we went over some of the key pieces of information together in a room. We had technical people in the room, our technical people in the room, the First Nations, and we sat together in a room and discussed it, listened to the concerns, made changes to the plan, incorporated the changes, incorporated the traditional knowledge into that to better understand wildlife behavior. And inherently, by being together in a room for several hours, you also build relationships. Because during that break, when you're going for coffee or you're having lunch, you start talking about personal things on a human-to-human level. And we have found huge successful strides in building that relationship at Conuma, and that is the momentum we want to build upon. And as a result, Conuma and First Nations collectively have come together to show support to regulatory bodies of various activities and projects at Conuma. I would say that has been a huge successful learning and something we want to carry into the new year and going forward. Thank you.
Quick comment, Elizabeth, if we could, so we can move along.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe I just want to go into a couple of the practical ways that we could go about early, frequent, transparent communication, building trust. Obviously, all of these things take time, and you really need to put a lot of work and effort and have the right people on your team engaging with those Indigenous groups. What I would say is we've had the opportunity to have a lot of outside-the-box thinking here recently with the KSM project, and I just wanted to share a couple of examples. We have impact benefits agreements signed with the Tahltan Nation and the Nisga'a Nation, and really a neat activity that they did recently was work collaboratively together to establish a new economic business called the Treaty Creek Limited Partnership, where those two nations can work collectively together in cooperation with Seabridge Gold on the KSM project to maximize the economic benefits for the project, as well as maximizing training opportunities for their respective nations. In addition to that, on the impact benefits agreement with the Nisga'a Nation, they recently established nations royalty. What a fantastic way for them to look at pooling the royalties that they receive from various companies in their territory, of which KSM is one, and working out ways to have economic prosperity across their nation for the long term. Also partnerships, Gabe, as an example, and Teck as an example, the Tahltan Industry Working Group, really focusing on partnerships and ways to work together. The Tahltan Industry Working Group is a collective of the Tahltan Nation, of Seabridge Gold, Skeena Resources, and of course I'm going to forget one, Teck, Newmont, and Galore, where we work collectively to understand the needs and the wants of the Tahltan Nations, advocate collectively on what those are, so that we can communicate to the government and ensure that resources are available when needed. A good example of this is the funding for Highway 37. Also looking for ways for those nations to have real investment in your projects, whether it be equity or what have you. Having those conversations, I think, is important. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, everyone. Maybe we should probably move along to one last question. I'm just noting the time here. And we wanted to address this, and it's BC's mining and refining operates within integrated North American and international supply chains that are dependent on two key factors to ensure supply chain validity. The first is certainty in trade relations, and the second is port, rail, road, and electrical infrastructure. So could each of you take a moment and address each of these, trade rules and infrastructure requirements, as it relates to your project and operations? And I'll begin with Doug.
Yeah, certainly the trade topic is front and center for a lot of folks right now. I can't imagine what's behind that. Maybe, I think, focus a little bit, because I think the unfortunate thing is at the moment in time and the focus on trade barriers and the risks of tariffs and things has actually had the unfortunate effect of obscuring where the real opportunity lies for both Canada and the US to work collaboratively to strengthen our shared critical minerals supply chain. And it really is a shared supply chain. That's not a new thing. There's significant shared economic and transportation supply chain linkages between our countries. We can and should be working collectively together to bring on more mining, more processing capacity, to provide more of those materials domestically in North America, to start to challenge dominance of other countries where they've sewn up a lot of this capacity because we have the resources here in BC, we have them in Canada, we have them in the US, and we have the ability to work together to bring them on faster, streamline permitting, make the right investments, and put in the right competitive tax regimes and other incentives to make that happen. And I'll give an example from Teck. We have a mine in Alaska, the Red Dog Mine. It's the world's largest zinc mine. That mine in the United States is one of the world's largest sources of zinc ore. That ore is then transported from Alaska to our trail operations here in British Columbia, the refinery there. We refine that into refined zinc and lead products along with specialty metals like germanium and indium and other products. And then we sell that to over 100 customers across 35 states in the United States. It's a perfectly integrated supply chain where the mining capacity is in the US, the refining capacity is in Canada, and collectively we meet the needs of a host of customers across high-tech, defense, all sorts of applications, and we do that for the benefit of both Canada and the US, creating jobs on both sides of the border. That's the kind of supply chain integration we can do more of. We should be collaborating. We should be creating a North American strategy for critical minerals growth and development. I think that's where we need to focus and move past the focus on trade disruption, which doesn't benefit anybody.
Thanks, Doug. And Martin, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, the big topic here, I would say that we are proud, and I think probably all the panelists and the companies they represent are proud to work to very high standards with regards to every element of what we've been talking about, in addition to things like workplace safety and other issues. And all of those things entail a cost, and I think, again, all our companies are proud to take that on. We, of course, deal in a global market. There are mechanisms that for example, the European Union is developing around carbon border pricing to ensure that the price of materials that is flowing into those countries is fully reflective of what the real cost is to produce them and levels the playing field. And I do think that Canada needs to think seriously, along with our allied countries, to implement similar practices in order to protect our industries. I do think that there's a risk that mining and extractive industries in our country and in other allied countries face a real existential risk in the face of competition from global actors who just simply do not adhere to our same values and our same standards. And that's something that I think that there needs to be a wake-up call provincially and nationally to really think deeply about that.
Thanks, Martin. Anybody else? Okay. Well, with that, let's move to closing remarks. Everybody will take a minute just to give a summation of their point of view, and maybe Martin will begin with you.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate all the comments, the great comments from the panelists here today. Two things I might touch on. I mentioned earlier, again, we are a company in the pre-regulatory phase, and we're very much benefiting from the establishment of the Critical Minerals Office to increase our readiness, and also we see that this is increasing the readiness of government and the various ministries. We really call on the government now to think about a similar initiative with respect to First Nations for projects that have been identified as those of being of interest to the province, projects like some of those that have been discussed here today. What we hear from some of the nations that we work with at our project is, where's the government? Why isn't the government coming to talk to us about our project? We're seeing this week some of those discussions are happening, but a formal office or a formal table that could really redouble efforts from a G2G standpoint between the province and nations, either on a bilateral basis with each nation individually, or potentially a multilateral framework to advance conversations around our project on a G2G basis to ensure that nations are prepared and they have the ability to increase their readiness, including through capacity funding, so that when projects enter the process, that nations are fully ready for that to occur. Beyond that, I think we're excited to hear more from both the province and the federal government about the initiative around loan guarantees and First Nations equity participation. There have been splashy announcements there, but not a lot of meat on the bone in terms of how that's actually going to work. I think that those are going to be critical conversations to drive this broader conversation on permitting forward as well, if nations can be true, equity partners in advancing these projects.
Thanks, Martin. Elizabeth.
So thanks, Tim. Today's discussion really highlights the sheer opportunity that we have in front of us. By working collaboratively with everyone in this room, all of industry, government, Indigenous groups, and communities, we can ensure that BC leads in the critical mining space. It's not just about economic development. It's about sustainable, responsible development, reconciliation, and a legacy for future generations.
Nadia?
Yeah, bringing it back to the title, Permitting to Prosperity, I think, to really unlock BC's mining opportunities and the resources that this province is very much blessed to have, we know a few things. One, that these resources, although vast, are finite. And second, environmental standards are only going to increase. Collaboration involvement of First Nations and local communities are going to increase, as they should. So therefore, I believe we need at least two things. One, which is we as industry need to get innovative and creative to be able to mine sustainably and responsibly. And second, we need a regulatory framework that supports that innovation, where there's agility in the review process, such that it is more outcomes focused to allow for permits to move through. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia. Gabe.
Thanks, Tim. 3 points briefly for me. I think the first is, I think there's a lot of good work ongoing right now to improve our regulatory processes. And I think there's been good detailed discussion here about some of the specifics on where we see opportunity for that. I just want to reemphasize the point that I think we need to consider what's already good about our regulatory regime and make sure that we're not losing that as those changes are being made. In particular, just focusing in on the quality of the authorizations. We're going through these processes for the purpose of having that authorization. We need to think about ensuring that it's strong and can provide what we need. Second, regulatory processes are increasingly complex, and it takes a lot of expertise within industry and also within Indigenous groups to be able to effectively navigate through those processes, and we need to really be careful that we're supporting Indigenous groups with building the capacity to successfully navigate these complex processes. Last, we didn't get into it much today, but I think one final thing to note is that the regional infrastructure and the government support for developing that regional infrastructure, I think, is really critical as we look to develop new projects, in particular greenfield projects that are further away from urban centers. I think one of the most important things we can do in moving those projects forward is to make sure that there's government funding for development of new roads, power infrastructure, and so on. So thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Gabe. Doug.
I'll be quick because I think we're already at time. I will say, I think as everyone said, the opportunity is enormous, but it is the competition for that opportunity is also significant. We're in a global competition with other nations for capital, for investment. So we need to be ambitious and we need to be creative in how we work together as industry and government to solve the challenges that we see in permitting timelines, to create that certainty, and to ensure we have the most competitive regime possible, while also the most environmentally and socially regime possible to incentivize new mine development, new processing investments, and really take advantage of that opportunity to create jobs and build BC's economy with critical minerals.
Thanks, Doug. I'd like to thank all our panelists. I'd also like to thank the C3 Alliance and our sponsor today, the Prince George Hospice Palliative Care Society. And it was nice to have the introduction this morning or today from Shirley Bond. So thank you, Shirley, for being here. And thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the BC Natural Resources Forum.